Conservative MPs are saying the immigration minister should be out of a job in the wake of this new CBC News exclusive. The headline, "Where is Canada's immigration minister?" Community groups are asking, and some of Lena Diab's own colleagues are questioning her performance. Laurence Martin is with Radio-Canada, and she joins us now. This is your reporting, a fantastic piece that everybody should go out and read. Give them a headline, a sense of what you found.
Yeah, well, at first we started talking with stakeholders, for instance, like the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress, who, wants to meet with Minister Lena Diab and has been wanting a one-on-one meeting, an in-person meeting for months now, and hasn't been able to get one. And we were starting to hear with my colleague Yasmin Mehdi, who also worked on this story, that there were other community organizations. We talked to 6 of them who had trouble meeting with Minister Lena Diab. And they were saying to us, for instance, with Mark Miller, when he was federal minister of immigration, yes, the government lowered immigration targets, but at least communication was easier. And, they started telling us, where is she in the media? Why isn't she giving more interviews? Then we started talking to opposition MPs and opposition parties who started to say to us, have you seen her performance in committee meetings? Her answers or her non-answers? She seems to rely a lot on civil servants or on her staff. Alexis Brunel-Duceppe from the Bloc Québécois was like, does she really master her files? It doesn't seem like she does. And then we started calling Liberal MPs to get a sense of how it was felt internally. And 10 Liberal MPs agreed to talk to us under the condition that we didn't name their names so they could speak freely. And only one of them out of the 10 defended Lena Diab's work. The other 9 were saying to us basically, when we ask her questions, it's often hard to get a clear answer. She doesn't seem to really have a master of her files. And they were even questioning her place around the cabinet table. And I'm not going to reveal our sources, but I'm just going to say this. It was not just backbenchers. Let's just leave it at that. Now, Lena Diab has not, she declined her interview request. She didn't provide a statement, but, she was visible today in question period, and we'll hear her in a second. But we did get a statement from the Prime Minister's office, and I would say it was a timid response. When he was asked in French today, for instance, whether he had confidence in Lena Diab, he said, I'm blessed with an exceptional cabinet. So he didn't even say, yes, I trust Lena Diab. He just talked about an exceptional cabinet.
I can't tell you how many people sent me your piece before the beginning of my day. And it sort of speaks to the fact that Conservatives, they've been pretty critical of this minister for a while now, but boy, it went into overdrive today.
Yes, well, they basically said that Lena Diab should be fired. They called her a failed minister, and they asked, this issue really dominated question period. I think we have some exchanges.
She is a bad minister. If the Liberal caucus doesn't even think she should have her job, why is the Prime Minister still defending her?
The job that I have is never easy. It is one of the toughest jobs in government.
So with results like these, why is she still in her job?
And when will this Prime Minister fire this minister?
Where she can't answer basic questions about bills that she is presented to Parliament.
On my record and work on immigration, the record speaks for itself.
She is restoring integrity to the immigration system, and the personal attacks are cruel, inappropriate, and beneath this House.
The House deserves a straight answer. When is she getting fired?
Now, as you can see, there were a lot of criticism thrown at Lena Diab today. There were also criticism thrown at Mark Carney, including from one Liberal MP that I spoke to, who said that maybe some of her colleagues, some Liberal MPs, are critical of Lena Diab because they feel like, maybe the government is cutting too much in terms of immigration, or it's too much of a shift. So maybe they should, talk to Mr. Carney instead. And she also pointed out, or this MP also pointed out that, at the end of the day, it's Mr. Carney who appoints, his cabinet. He's responsible for, making those decisions. So we'll see what happens next.
All right. Well, amazing reporter. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Laurence Martin. All right, let's return to the power panel now to discuss this story. I'm joined, of course, by Amanda, Tim, Jordan, and Sherelle. Jordan, do you want to weigh in on this first? As I say, I was flooded with people sending me this saying, what on earth is going on here? What do you make of the story?
Well, I think it's very challenging for the government when you have a weak minister on what is such a politically potent and important file right now, and one that the government has been viewed as weak on in general. And I think it's fair to say out the gate as well, for the minister that having Michelle Rumpel-Garner and Jenny Kwan as your opposition critics is tough. Those are two very whip-smart, dynamic, experienced MPs who are very on top of the file. So the contrast is doubly striking then when you see the minister at committee reaching for numbers and maybe not having that same grasp and dynamism. But it's a problem for the government because we've seen in Canada over the last 2 years a really precipitous drop in support for immigration among the public. And there's a lot of factors going into this, but it is something that the government isn't seen to have a handle on, in particular because the Trudeau government was viewed as being responsible for a big increase in immigration to Canada that a lot of Canadians see as unsustainable. And so if that's the case, there's a big change that the public needs to perceive from the government in the management of the file. But if your minister is invisible, and if your minister doesn't seem to have a grasp of the facts of the file, it's pretty tough to carry off that pivot politically.
For sure.
Yeah, you and I were here when Jason Kenney was called the Minister of Curry in a hurry. And that was said with positive affection at the time because it was before he became the immigration minister, but he was so connected with different Canadian communities, new Canadians coming in. And he demonstrated one of the key characteristics of being a good immigration minister. You got to, well, two actually, have to be a good communicator and you have to connect with communities. He, Mark Miller, another immigration minister, and Marco Mendicino all three were good at also being connected to their peers. What leaps out in Laurence's story is the casework element. So for people who don't know, MPs have staff. A lot of them do immigration casework. Every MP in this country probably has a direct line to somebody in the immigration minister's office. It sounds like whatever is happening isn't happening to the satisfaction of these MPs. And if you don't understand the important role you play in helping these MPs, as Laurence seems to depict from the comments that she's getting, you're in trouble. And Lena Diab has political skills. She demonstrated that in Nova Scotia, but she doesn't seem to have the, she isn't being given the green light to do it, but she's not comfortably communicating what it is she wants to do with immigration. Jordan made the point about, the transition from the numbers going lower and the Trudeau government being there. Mark Miller was handed that bag of turd and played it very well. Lena Diab, I don't know what bag she's been handed, but she's not playing any of the three key elements of the immigration role well.
I think, Shrell, until today, you could make, people were saying she's a weak minister, and I think there was pushback on that. It feels like you can sometimes see the wall breaking down. It feels like that argument is an awful lot harder to make after their reporting this morning.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that it's an argument that's being made for a little while longer. I mean, back in December, the Hill Times we'd reported on a constituent of Lena Diab's who was trying desperately to get her brother, who was affected by the civil war in Sudan, and into Canada. And the allegation there was that after trying for a very long time to get in touch with her, she finally got her on the phone and she was yelled at, the constituent says. So, so there's that element that Tim was talking about connection, and that's that connection with the communities who are wildly affected. It's not just the people who are trying to come into the country, it's the people who are already here, who are trying to get their families in, who are trying to sort out their own pathways to residency, who are, trying to have to put thousands of dollars away and just sit on it and hope that, the programs that they were promised are going to be there for them are going to work out. Those are all of those elements. And if you can't meet with people, if you can't sit down, if you can't communicate, that becomes really difficult. So we've been hearing from other people, when everybody was saying, oh, there's going to be another cabinet shuffle, it'll happen in January, et cetera. Lena Diab's name was always one that came up as somebody who should have been being seen as being leaving out the door. And the fact that she's still here is almost kind of baffling.
Right. Amanda, baffling? There's a lot to react to here at the table.
Yes. Listen, I'm always wary of, there's always going to be a story of a single constituent that has a bad experience. And I don't think that that's any way to put a report card on a particular minister or member of caucus. I do, however, think that there's some flags here. The main flag is that there wasn't really an kind of like an army of defense or support behind Minister Diab. And I think that that is alarming. Typically, when a story like this is percolating, and the story has come up for a little while, it's not brand new today, typically they would be sourcing organizations that have had excellent experiences with the minister so that they can counter some of that narrative. We didn't hear that. So I think that there's a few challenges. I think communications is a big challenge. The role of minister is not a backroom role. This is a role, especially in this file, and some files require this more than others, to be a superior communicator. On a file this important with so much public profile, you need somebody who is both comfortable communicating, willing to take it on, and that communication needs to exist with both media in order to reach the public, but it also has to exist with stakeholders. And it's the stakeholder piece for me that I think was the most alarming. That and the fact that members of her own caucus weren't able to come to her defense. I do think that this now becomes a bit of a liability for the government. They're either going to have to find a way to get her front and center and get her, in front of stakeholders to enact some meaningful relationships, or they're going to have to replace her, which is really unfortunate if this did come down to simply a communication challenge.
It's a bit surprising in some ways, right? Because she was a politician, or is a politician from Nova Scotia, and we all know enough about the Nova Scotia legislature to know that there is a requirement that you are constantly in contact with people, but perhaps she was of the view, or is of the view, that there's the same degree of contact. There's more contact. When you're the federal minister of immigration, you've got to have the ability, or have surrogates who can help you talk to people all across the country. And I go back to the point about the MPs. The MPs really rely on the immigration minister's office to help them. And if for whatever reason that isn't happening, that causes them political headaches all across the country, and they will quickly, this is what Miller, Jason, and Marco all got. I don't want headaches from my colleagues, so I'm going to make sure that works. And it seems, again, she's not getting that.
Everybody said coming into the election that Mark Carney's great drawback was that he was an inexperienced politician. And he's made some moves that have made him look like a pretty deft politician. Is this his first real political crisis that he's going to have to deal with, like in terms of the traditional kind of politics, caucus management, cabinet management that you have to deal with as a leader?
I can think, he's had some other moments, I think, that were difficult. I think about the Air Canada flight attendant strike and the reaction there and the way that blew back on him really dramatically. So I think it's not the first. But what I find surprising in this case is that for a prime minister who's noted as a manager and somebody I think who really sees himself as the CEO of government and who has a reputation for not, tolerating poor performance lightly, it's surprising to me that she's been allowed to remain in this role, in particular when this is a topic that you're seeing the Conservatives pick up and use as a cudgel with the government. So this week, of course, they brought forward a motion in the House of Commons that was going after refugee health care. Now, look, there's lots of reasons why refugee health care costs are growing. It has more to do with the system backlog. But if you had an effective minister, you would be able to go out and you'd be able to really make that case and kind of dismantle and maybe even put the Conservatives a little bit on their back feet for taking a Trumpy tone on the issue of immigration. Like, that would be a functional thing for the minister to do. But that did not happen. And so I think it's surprising in a Carney-led cabinet that we would see a poor performer allowed to continue on such a high-profile file.
All right, so I'm going to ask everybody this, but I'm going to ask you first. Do you think she stays in the job?
I mean, the fact that she's been staying in the job leads me to believe that she will. Yeah. I mean, because ultimately, what some people have said is correct. This is Mark Carney's decision to who gets to stay in cabinet. She has her marching orders in terms of carrying out a certain immigration plan. Whether or not he sees that she needs to be, I don't know, I don't want to call it warm and cuddly in doing that, maybe he sees that as a bonus.
Amanda, what do you think? Does she stay in the job, or are you starting to put the clock on her?
I don't think that this is at crisis level. I can't recall who said that it might be. I don't think that's what this is. I think that if it turns into a story that continues to dog him for, a number of days or weeks, and we don't see some improvement, or we don't see her able to take the reins on this file, or we don't see other stakeholders coming out in support, he may be forced to make some shifts. But he also doesn't want to be seen as the prime minister who has like the feigned outrage of the Conservatives force his hand on an issue like this, because they can come after another minister for another reason next week. So this is a careful balancing act for him at this point.
It's probably other duties as described when the next cabinet shuffle comes along. I don't think it's an immediate termination. I think when a cabinet shuffle comes, unless she's improved the way she deals with her caucus and stakeholders, she'll be doing another job.
For what it's worth, I was the one who called it a crisis, not any of the smart people on the panel. Do you think it rises to the issue of crisis yet?
No, I mean, I think, and this is also something, you have to be careful not to seem reactive to your opponents on this, right?
Yes.
So I think, I am sure that PMO is aware that there's a problem here, but they will make a move when the spotlight is off.
Does it speak to the fact that we haven't had a lot of, it's easy to run a caucus, it's easy to run a cabinet when you're winning, and they've been mostly winning. These kinds of things do burble up, though, and how you manage them sets the course for what the next ones will look like. Fair?
Sure. Well, and I think we're actually seeing Pierre Poilievre live a little bit of that right now, where, the type of caucus management that works when you're really high in the polls often can really backfire when the road gets a bit rockier. And so, I think the Prime Minister, he is new at politics, and even though he's shown himself to be very deft at a lot of elements of it, caucus management is a whole other universe. And so it is worth putting in that time, I think, always, because it pays dividends down the road. So we'll see if he's able to do that.
All right, I'm going to call it there. Thank you all. That was smart and engaging, and I'm smarter for it. The Power Panel: Amanda Alvaro, Tim Powers, Jordan Leichnitz, and Sherelle Evelyn.